joining in this lunchtime, and obviously a massive thank you to our speakers today. A few words and a bit of background. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Barry Cranford. I'm the founder of the London Java community. So I'm not a developer myself. I run a tech recruitment company called RecWorks. Here at RecWorks, we've been on a mission for the last 12 years to find ways that recruitment can be a force for good in the tech industry, beyond just getting people jobs. So this all came about when I realized years ago that we spent all day, every day, speaking to developers and employers in the same industry, in the Java industry. So devs, grads, CTOs, people coming into to London at the time, juniors, seniors, all sorts. So I started wondering if we could use our position as connectors, as recruiters, in other ways. So that's what this has really progressed to. So now we try and bring people together around things like learning, development, career development, that kind of thing, and mentoring. So basically, I'm a bit of a career enthusiast or a career geek. And I like to look at the hacks and the shortcuts that people find and have found to improve their careers, and then see if we can build things that can bring people together around those hacks. So anyway, so most recently, we've been trying something we've not done before. So we're bringing small learning groups together, or bringing people together around these small learning groups. One of these groups is called Aspiring Speakers, which aims to encourage a new diverse generation of speakers. And this event is essentially part of that. So the point of these events is to encourage new speakers to get involved, and to essentially give a safe place to get started, to practice, and get feedback, while obviously entertaining you guys over lunch. So we do have today a bit of a range of experience levels. So not everybody is experienced speakers. We do have a Java champion in the mix today. But we do have some new ones as well. And just a few words on feedback as well. We'll send out some links to feedback forms. So feedback is obviously crucial, especially when you're getting started, for people to hear how they're getting on. So any words of encouragement, please do share it after the talks. Anyway, okay, I'll kick off then with our first talk, which is going to be Anirban Santra on AutoML, the machine learning of machine learning. Anirban, take it away.
Yes. Am I audible, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me share my screen first. Okay. I'm not able to getting option to, because you are sharing your screen or someone, multiple participant can share. Okay. Yes.
It's not working at the moment?
Yeah, I believe it is now working.
Got it. Yeah, you're on, you're good.
Yes, so, okay, let me start first. Yeah, hi. Hi, this is Anirban. Actually, I am a lead engineer in IBM. As Barry mentioned, so I have started speaking maybe a couple of months ago. So I'm still a learner. So today, actually, I just want to discuss about a very interesting topic, which is AutoML, which is the machine learning of machine learning. So machine learning is very essential in today's development scenario, because every developer should share some of their tasks using machine. But to use the machine learning properly, and the proper algorithm to be used to solve a particular problem needs a steep learning curve, because there are whole lots of algorithms available. And we need to know that which algorithm would best suitable for the problem we are trying to resolve. So this is a bit of learning curve needed. So let's say I'm just going to give a quick example. It's a pretty simple classification problem where we are trying to detect the spam, and this is actually how it works. In a classical way of using machine learning is to just at first analyze the data, try to identify that, okay, those spam word like discount, discounted price, huge discount. So those words, when it will appear in our email, so the machine learning machine will just try to catch that as spam. Now, to do that one, in the course of the operation, we need to do the feature extraction. This is pretty important because most of the data scientists generally spend 70% of their time to do the feature extraction. So it's important because in this case, what we are going to do, the discount is a single word. So we have to map discount, discounted, or discounts, everything in a discount word. And now we have to label it. So we have to identify the sequence number in the spam dictionary where the word discount located, and how many times that particular word occurs in the email. And ultimately we run classification problem. So second step is feature extraction. Third phase is classification. Here now the dilemma is that which algorithm we use. And in this case, we need experienced people to identify that which algorithm should be best suitable. The same analogy can be drawn when we are in a hospital. Maybe for example, one patient has some simple headache, and which department, because hospital has multiple department, it has neurology department, it has eye department, it has a general medicine department, where we go? So the patient needs to know something about his symptoms and how it is related to a disease. Rather, if in the front desk there would be a nurse, actually it happens, or someone who knows medical terms or medical things very well, he can do a preliminary examination and at least guide the patient, okay, your problem looks like it is a eye related problem, go to the eye department. Then it would be pinpointed. So ML, AutoML, automatic machine learning, or machine learning does the same thing. So the scientist, the data scientist, what he acquired the knowledge in course of his machine learning career, that kind of knowledge, how we can fit to a machine so that machine can do the same thing. Machine can identify the proper algorithm. For that, I just jotted down the steps we have to follow. It's pretty mechanical with Microsoft environment. We have to first load the data. Then we have to select a machine learning algorithm task type. So in our case, it was a binary classification because we are trying to identify the output. It is a spam detection or not. Next, we can create the experiment. Experiment creation is very important. So we have to give what is the maximum experiment time, because the AutoML will continuously try to run different type of features extraction, different type of algorithm it will apply and try to optimize the solution. So we have to provide that how much time it will maximum try, what would be the metrics it is going to use, and which algorithm we can skip, which no need to run. Ultimately, the data processing, this is very important. It's very nice to listen that the data processing and featureization also will be taken care by AutoML. So where 70% time has been spent to do that one, it can drop the features, missing value indication and imputation. So everything can be done by it, the service, the AutoML service, and it will do all those permutation and combination and ultimately identify the optimal solution. Then we have to give the exit criteria, how long it will try, how long it will do the experiment, create the experiment, and run the experiment. That's it. Now we get the result. So this is the end that I have copied it from our actual runnable application. It was actually used my last project. Let's see, all those algorithms have been tried and the micro accuracy have been mentioned. And this red box one are the most suitable algorithm can be used. And in fact, in our case, we have used the light GBM multi algorithm. So whenever the algorithm you can identify, you can get a train or test data right. That's it. You will get the desired output. So in this lecture, actually, in this session, I have just discussed about how we can use it, but there are lots of details has been provided here. And the last link is very important, where the a developer can get some code, so they can just look at it and implement it. So that's it from my end. It's done. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anirban. Did anyone have any questions to throw at him there? Feel free just to unmute your mic and I can bring you in.
Hi, I've got a question. You mentioned at the beginning of your talk that this is happening on the Microsoft stack. So does it mean that you need a Microsoft stack to train the model, or do you also need one to actually run the model?
Yeah, actually, I have used the Microsoft because Microsoft has provided this AutoML libraries and all those things. So it can be done through Microsoft. Python has also provided the similar functionality. So any technology anyone can use. Currently, we have used the Microsoft stack. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Carsten. Thanks, Anirban. Dom Carlo has kindly just popped the feedback link on the chat box. So you can see that if you just go to the bottom of the screen and press chat. If you're not familiar with Zoom, then you can see that there. Please, please, please add a few comments or just multiple choice. There's some sort of quick, easy ways that you can send a message. So yeah, I'd really appreciate that. We usually get 15 to 20, I'd say, bits of feedback for each event. So yeah, be really good to get a few things back. Carsten, I see your cat's making an appearance again. For anyone that didn't see Carsten's lightning talk, the cat actually made an appearance right in the middle of it, I think, which was a particularly good one. Okay, cool. So next up we have James Carman. So James is going to be speaking on implementing architecture fitness functions with ArchUnit. So James, if and when you're ready.
Yes, good morning from Cincinnati, Ohio area in the United States. Nice to see somebody else here from the United States. Carson looks like he's here from New York. Oh, that looks like a apartment from New York there. And the cat. Okay, so we're going to talk about, let me go ahead and fire this up here, the slideshow. So we're like you said, we're going to talk about implementing architecture fitness functions using ArchUnit. And I've said ArchUnit, ArchUnit. I've heard people say it both ways. I don't know which way is the correct way, so I'll say Arch. Let's try that. Whoops, went back too far. So there's a book out called Building Evolutionary Architectures by Neil Ford et al. The idea here is traditionally we think of architecture as the things that are difficult to change. But they're trying to flip that, and so that you design your architectures for change so that they're easy to change and set it up in such a way that you can do so very quickly and easily. So an evolutionary architecture is going to focus on that modularity and the coupling that's involved in your architecture. Typically, you're going to organize an evolutionary architecture by business capabilities. When you design it this way, it allows for experimentation with different ideas, and it's based on the idea of evolutionary computation, where for each generation, you apply a fitness function after every evolution of the algorithm. It applies a fitness function to see how you're doing, right? So we use the same concept of fitness functions in evolutionary architecture. So a fitness function is going to provide an objective measure of one of the architectural characteristics, the ILIDs, as everybody calls them. This helps you identify your target architecture, or what it looks like, what it should look like. And you can, like I said, you're doing experiments. You can do experiments with architectural ideas, right? So you can make a change in your architecture and use the fitness functions that are applied to see how you did. If you make it worse, it's probably not a good idea. ArchUnit allows us to write these type of fitness functions as just regular old unit tests, right? So we just use JUnit, and we can write unit type tests to implement these fitness functions. So a rule typically looks like you have a thing, or you try to find things, you apply predicates to them to select the appropriate things you're talking about, and then you apply conditions to them. You say these things should have this condition. The things in ArchUnit, this is the domain model for ArchUnit. The center of the world obviously is the Java class. Classes have members. Those are fields, or they've split these things into what they call code units. That's a constructor, a method, or a static initializer. So that's all of the ways you can actually write code inside a class is with those type of constructs. Those can access fields, call constructors, call methods, and they can throw exceptions. So when we want to test these classes and see how they're doing, we import them, and we create a class file importer. You can just import the entire class path. You can import the class path, but you can add import options to disregard test classes. Or you can just say, I only want the things in this package. There's also another construct for just specifying very specific classes, but we don't cover that. And like I said, you're dealing with regular old unit tests, right? This is just a regular JUnit 5 unit test here. So this is the typical pattern you'll see. You import some classes, you define some rules. So this one says no classes that reside in the service package should access classes in a controller package. So you have a service, which is part of your kernel or part of your domain model. And then you have a controller, which is typically like a web thing. You don't want your domain calling back out to the web. So it's just kind of enforcing that architecture, that layer there. And the very important part, this next part here, is this rule.check. Make sure you do this. I can't tell you how many times I've done I really come up with these really nice DSL-based rules, and I say, oh, this is really cool. This is exactly what I want. And I run my tests, and I'm pulling out my hair, which I don't have any, so it doesn't work very well. Trying to figure out, why did this not fail? What is wrong here? And it's because I forgot to actually check the rule. So do not forget this. That's one of the gotchas. Although there is a different way that you can actually construct these tests. You can put analyze classes. This is from ArchUnit, and you say which packages you want to deal with. And then you just declare them as fields. So it has an JUnit 5 engine. So it actually looks through these fields and tries to find these arc tests fields. So this is the exact same rule, just implemented with a field-based method. We're going to go through some examples of things you can do. So this is naming conventions. You can say all your controllers that are REST controllers, think of Spring Web MVC, they must have a simple name ending with controller. So this DSL reads very nicely. It spells it out pretty succinctly what you're trying to do. It can get a little more gnarly than this, but this is typically what you'll see. Access restrictions, we have an infrastructure JPA, all the classes that implement our repository interfaces. We want to say nobody outside of that package should actually be talking to an entity manager object, which is the JPA center of the world. And then they supply these generic coding rules, this class called generic coding rules, where these all caps things, those are actually fields in that class, and you can import them and just use them. These say you can't do standard in, standard out, don't touch those, standard error. You should not throw generic exceptions like runtime exception or just a flat out exception, and don't use Java util logging. Presumably they want them to use like SLF or J or something. So they have a couple of architecture classes. The first one, or architecture, like pre-baked setups for architectures. This is the layered architecture. You basically define your layers, and then you can say which layer can access what. And it will look at your layers based on the packages that are defined, and it will start enforcing those rules that you've implemented here. It also has the onion architecture, which is similar to maybe an adaptation of the ports and adapters or hexagonal architecture. You have domain models, services, application services are on the outside of that, and then the adapters, the things that go out and talk to like your infrastructure bits or the incoming adapters that allow other people to interact with your domain model. So you can define that here, and it'll automatically enforce it based on common practices with the onion architecture. And the last thing here is slices. So you can basically slice your code into, I think of them vertically, I don't know why, but you can slice your code into vertical slices, and you can make sure that what relationships they have with one another. Here I give a plugin example. So if you have a plugin type of architecture, typically your plugins, you don't want talking to each other at all. They're doing their own thing. They shouldn't rely on other plugins. But in another case, you might have things that are more like modules. And you might want the modules to talk to one another, but they better be free from cycles so that your architecture now can evolve. If I have cycles between my modules, it's very hard to rip those apart and break them out into like microservices later. So you can enforce these type of rules this way. That's it. Do you have any questions?
Thanks, James. Does anyone got any questions there for James at all on the presentation?
Yeah, sure. I've got a question.
Ilan, go ahead.
This seems very much for a monolithic type system. Can you use this kind of thing for like a diverse microservices environment that's got many languages in it?
So the ArchUnit in particular is a Java-based library. So you probably not now you can use it in polyglot with Scala or one of the other JVM languages, but in a microservice environment, you still might want to have some rules internal to your project, like how the structure of things, how they're laid out. You know, like Maven's very opinionated about where things go. Sometimes architects can be very opinionated about the structure of things. And it just helps when new people start on the project and they know where to go to get things. But yes, you're right. It's designed for that, you know, make a monolith versus more of what I think I heard the term the other day, a modulith, right? A modular monolith, and to enforce that structure so that later when you do say, hey, this stuff needs to be carved out into a microservice, you can more easily do that.
Right, okay, so in my mind, this would be very useful if you're building like a physical deployable application. Does that make sense?
Yes, and they even have a facility for, if you apply a rule base to an existing code, like a legacy code base, you can actually say, okay, there's persistence involved. So you basically say, okay, here's my rule base. I know some of the stuff that exists is violating this stuff like crazy, kind of like in Sonar. You can say, don't worry about old code, but anything that changes in new code, or you add new code, or any changes you make, you better not violate rules in that stuff. You can do the very same thing here with ArchUnit.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Alan. Thanks, James. Appreciate that. Again, if you can feel free to pop some feedback on the link is there in the chat, so the same link should work. Thanks to Trisha, Nax, Kabir, and Helen who have already submitted some feedback, so it's good. Get the ball rolling there, and I can see a couple more coming in now, so that is awesome. Okay, so we're moving on next. Then we've got Theo Liantz giving us an introduction to Elixir and Phoenix. So Theo, whenever you're ready.
Hello everyone, I'll just share my screen. Yeah, good, well done on the name, Barry. So my name is Theo Liantz, and I have a confession to make, which is I'm not a Java developer. I was for 5 years a JavaScript developer, but I started a new job in January working as an Elixir developer, particularly with the Phoenix framework, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. With the aim of giving a little bit of general introduction and short demo of kind of how you could be quite productive with it quite quickly, fingers crossed. So if you've never seen an Elixir program before, it has a rich and intriguing history as a language itself. It leverages the Erlang VM, which is what WhatsApp uses, for example. It's functional, 30 years of history. But we're going to ignore all of that, and I'm just going to say that it allows us to compose programs as pipelines. And you have here this Hello World program. You have pipelines of small functions which operate on immutable data to produce some output. So you have discrete, well-designed, testable functions that you can compose into a program. That's a very vague and small description of what Elixir can do. But what is Phoenix? Phoenix is Elixir's web development framework. And building on the composability of the language itself and the kind of functional paradigm, it allows us and kind of enforces us really to compose web applications as similarly pipelines, but that operate on a particular kind of data, which is a connection. And a connection is one data structure that is used to handle both an HTTP request and an HTTP response. So as you see here, this is kind of pseudocode. This isn't real code, but you get your HTTP request that comes into the top of the application and becomes treated as a connection and percolates through these conventional layers of a Phoenix application and is gradually transformed into an HTTP response, which we can send to the client. And yeah, so these conventional layers are the endpoint, which is the web-facing part of the application, a routing layer, which hands off any parameters to a controller, which then will call business logic that is usually encapsulated in a context module, which is a kind of a Phoenix term to, yeah, basically just an API for business logic around a particular resource that you have in your application. And often it will group similar resources together. Then you have, so under the hood, Phoenix leverages this Elixir library called Ecto, which is a bit like an ORM, slightly lightweight compared to other ORMs. It helps us to model database schemas and associations between schemas, and it also provides this repo thing, which allows you to encapsulate actions on the underlying database. such as reads and writes, those sorts of things. And then finally, you're able to attach a kind of a payload to the connection to send as a HTML body or a JSON body or within reason anything. And then the connection exits the application and heads back to the client. So that's quite a high level idea of what goes on inside a Phoenix application. What does it look like in practice? Phoenix emphasizes productivity and particularly prototyping. And to this end, it ships with a bunch of tools you can run on the command line to generate either a whole new app, as you see here, which I've done beforehand, like before this talk, in the background, and it's running up, and we'll show you in a second. In fact, I'll show you now. If I'm able to get out of my, maybe I won't show you now. Yes, I will show you now. So, so the default app that you get running the generator to scaffold a basic application is this, not particularly exciting. However, you have the ability to generate a kind of slice through the layers of the application that we just saw in the previous slide in order to add an HTML resource. And let's run this, see if it works. Yeah, so this is a generator, and it takes, so Mix is basically just the kind of package manager and task runner and general dogs body of Elixir. It takes the name of the context module, the name of the schema itself, the name of the database table, and then some configuration for the fields it's going to add to that table. So yeah, so this generates an HTML resource, and we're going to create a context for general events, and the particular kind of event we're going to be concerned with right now is a lightning talk. So we want to add basically CRUD resources for uploading lightning talks to our currently very basic website. So we run that, and thank God it's all green. We see that it spits out a bunch of files, the controller, a collection of templates, and a view to allow us to show HTML pages, some tests, a schema, a migration, which is going to create and it's going to create a database table and make sure that it has the correct fields that we want, and then this kind of context, which is holds the business logic. And then helpfully, it tells us that we're going to need to add a route for this resource. And let's quickly, because I know we're running out of time, do what it tells us to. It's called Lightning, the web part of the application. Cool. Okay, so this is kind of going to gloss over the actual structure of this router file, but suffice to say that we've got this root scope, which has a bunch of sort of browser functions that do things like fetching sessions and setting headers. But also we can then say that under the Lightning Talks root, we are exposing what we've created, hopefully. So let's see what happens if we try and visit the route we've created. Okay, it tells us that we have pending migrations. We did see that it created a migration file, but we didn't run it. It's very handy. It allows us to run it from the web UI itself, which we've done, and it appears to be working, which is surprising. So let's add a new Lightning talk. I'm going to add my one, which is not, I'm not being self-absorbed, but and it allows us to edit. I think I might have gone slightly over, and then we can also see an index of all the talks we've had so far, and let's just delete that. Cool. That's it from me. Does anyone have any questions around what we just saw?
Thanks very much for that, by the way, Leo. Yeah, any questions? Any questions? Anirban, I see you've unmuted there.
Yes, actually, I'm just wondering that if we need to write the business logic, so what kind of language it would be? Like, is a Java, or what kind of language? I feel like it's completely command lines, command, and all those commands are being used, right? But which type of language, like a shell script, or yeah?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, in terms of the scaffolding and the generators, it is command line heavy, but the context that we saw are where the business logic goes, and you write that in Elixir, and Elixir is a fully complete language. You can do whatever you like, and
Okay.
but yeah, but Phoenix is entirely Elixir. You can make HTTP requests to other services if you.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, Elixir is the answer. So that's.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Anirban, and thanks, Theo. Appreciate that. I got your name right then. That was.
Yeah, brilliant.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So confession to everyone else, I only figured out how to pronounce that about 3 seconds before actually introducing Theo there. A reminder for the feedback. Thank you, Rosie, Alex, and PF, who just had some more feedback from, so I appreciate that. And I like that bit with the thank God it all went green. We've seen so many where it just doesn't work. I've seen it myself. It just so often the tech is the bit that that goes wrong. So yeah, that was good. There you go. Elixir, it all went green. Okay, so next we have Trisha G coming up, who is going to be giving a presentation on 3 tips for giving presentations. So Trisha,
yes.
Hello.
Right, here's where I start to share my screen and find out that everything goes wrong, because like when you're showing your screen, you know what I've done? I'm using Keynote, and I don't normally use Keynote when I'm sharing through Zoom because it never freaking works properly. Right, let's give this a go. Let's try sharing this one, do that, and then, okay, are we working? Looks, you can see my slides, right? Perfect. Okay, so yes, so today I'm going to talk to you about 3 tips for giving presentations, which is great for one thing. I don't have a live demo and things won't go wrong. So that's what I normally give presentations on, and it's usually absolutely terrifying. But 2, the terrifying bit of this is the fact that I'm giving tips on presentations to a bunch of people who have already given good presentations. So, you know, you can judge me based on your own abilities. I was also expecting there to be far more people who didn't know how to give presentations at this talk. So like, you lot can correct me for all of these things. Anyway, fun fact number 1, my first presentation was a lightning talk at the London Java community back in, I want to say 2011. So this totally kicked off my presenting career. If you really want to, you can actually have a look at that talk. There is a video from me giving that at Playfish back in the day. Please don't look at that. It's really quite terrible. Fun fact number 2, the people in the London Java community got me to where I am today. People like Martijn Verburg, people like Ben Evans, people like Jim Goff, people like Simon Maple, and Barry, of course, and they kind of helped me get me to where I am today. If you don't know who I am, then you probably don't care. But if you do, this is entirely through the London Java community and the efforts there. Fun fact number 3, Barry introduced me to my husband. And so this is all his fault. And I blame him every single day. Anyway, let's move on to the tips. Tip number 1, split your talk into 3. This is the easiest way to sort of tackle the presentation. And it doesn't really matter whether, I kind of pitched this at people who were thinking about giving lightning talks, particularly if you're giving talks for the first time, but it works for any length of talk really. So what I usually do is I split it into 3 to begin with: the intro, the talk, and the summary. And then I split it further. So the meat, then I split that into 3 main points normally. And then of course you can split it further. So for a lightning talk, this works really nicely because you've got 5 minutes. So you've got 1 minute of intro, 1 minute of point for each of the points, and 1 minute for the summary. By the way, I am speaking very fast and I should definitely slow down. I had like 3 coffees this morning and I'm extremely caffeinated. So yes, so split it into 3. It's a very easy way to manage it. So for lightning talks, it's great. You've got 1 minute per point. For longer conference talks, which are usually like 40 minutes plus questions, this works nicely. You have 5 minutes for an intro, 5 minutes for the summary, 10 minutes for questions, ignore that. And then you have 10 minutes for each of your points. So it's a really nice way to take a topic and split it down into something much more manageable. So prime numbers work really nicely. 3 is a good place to start. Point number 2, number of slides should be probably less than the number of minutes available to you. Your mileage may vary, but if you have a 30-minute slot and you've got 120 slides, you are very unlikely to get through that. This is particularly applicable for lightning talks. If you've got 20 slides in a lightning talk, you probably won't get through them. The most time, you know, you're usually going to spend about a minute per slide. There are caveats. If your slides are diagrams and if they go in very quick sequence, then you can probably flick through them quickly. For example, my intro slides just like whiz through them. My first presentation was an introduction to the disruptor, which was first full-length presentation, and that was a lot of images, and I had 120 slides for a 40-minute presentation. But a good rule of thumb is, generally speaking, you don't want more slides than the number of minutes. Point number 3, be yourself. People say things like this and it's kind of like, it doesn't really mean much, because you're like, okay, I can't really be anyone else. I am myself. Of course I'm going to be myself. What it means in terms of presentations is you have to have a fairly good understanding of yourself and your strengths and weaknesses. And this is actually surprisingly difficult, because we are ourselves just by getting on with being ourselves. We don't always overanalyze who we are and what we do. But in terms of presentations, it's really helpful to have a good understanding of like who you are, what works for you, what are your strengths and weaknesses. So for me, I tend to use humor when I'm uncomfortable. So I like to put humor into my presentations because it helps me to relax. A lot of other people find humor very difficult to get into presentations because they don't want to script it, they want it to be spontaneous, they don't know if they're funny or not, and they don't want to make stuff up on the fly. So some people will opt to not have humor in their presentations because it just takes the pressure off worrying about that particular thing. Similarly, like with the slide numbers, I like to have a lot of really quick fire slides. So my slide number is like way up per number of minutes, but other people like to have either detailed slides, or they like to have something like this with 2 words and then chat for 2 minutes on the slide. It depends a lot on who you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are. To be a good speaker, it takes practice figuring out what your style is, what works for you, what your strengths and weaknesses are. So point 4, it's okay to break the rules. Remember I said 3, I said split it into 3, and I said I've got 3 top tips. Tip number 4 is it's okay to break the rules, but you have to break the rules on purpose. You have to know you're breaking the rules, and you have to know why you're breaking the rules. So I've broken the rules because I was going to break the rules for a reason, to present to you that it's okay to break the rules. If you're going to have 120 slides in a 30-minute presentation, that's fine, as long as you know you can get through those slides, or whatever works for you. So it's absolutely fine to break the rules. The rules are very flexible, and they are to flex to suit you and your style, but absolutely do it on purpose. The guidelines are there to help you, to help make your life a lot easier. So yes, at this point, any questions?
I've got one.
Go shoot, Alan.
So I read recently that if you have 2 points, people will compare and contrast them. But if you have 3 points, they won't compare and contrast them. And if you have 4 points, they won't remember all the points. Does that sound correct to you?
Yeah, I pick 3 because humans, I don't know if it's a natural thing or a societal thing, but 3 is a nice number for us. We kind of, it fits nicely. We can split things into 3 easily. The idea of having 3 points to remember sits well in our heads. It's not as straightforward as that though. So my preference is for kind of prime numbers actually, 3 or 5. Especially for longer talks, you might have 5 sections. You might have 5 phases, or 5 points, or 5 flavors. So 5 works quite nicely too. But again, you're right in a way, in that if you go over 3, people probably won't remember them. That's kind of fine. Sometimes you might want to present. So I have a video which is like 15 top IntelliJ shortcuts. I don't expect people to remember 15. I expect them to see 15 and pick out 1 or 2 that they're interested in. So again, break the rules, but be aware that the rules are there for a reason. Like 3 top tips is so people can remember 3. If you want to give them more, just be aware that they're only going to remember the ones they want to remember.
And the other side, have you found that if you do just 2 things, people always compare them, but if you do 3 things, they don't?
I don't think I've ever done as few as 2 things.
Okay, thanks.
I think perhaps I do, if I have done compare and contrast type talks, but that's always intentional. I haven't accidentally picked 2 things and got them to, this is a really interesting point. I'd never heard that before. And it's entirely possible. but I tend to err on the side of like just dumping information at people instead.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Trish, and thanks, Ilan, for the questions there. Trish is actually going to be hanging around afterwards alongside Steve Poole, who's on the call as well. Both very experienced speakers and happy to answer any questions from speakers that have given presentations today, from anybody that might consider giving one in a couple of weeks or in the future. So yeah, please do hang around after the talks as well to speak to Trish and Steve. And again, sorry about Israel. Apologies for that. Yeah, all good. Okay. So for our final talk of today, then we have Jamie Coleman from IBM, who's going to be speaking on inside the coolest data centers. So Jamie, are you all set there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Barry. Let me just share my screen. Bear with me. Yeah, I didn't realize we'd have such good speakers coming on before me, so now I feel the pressure that I've got to do a good job. Can everyone see my screen okay? Has that come up? Do you see my screen? Yeah, wicked. Okay, so I'll get started. This is the first time I've done a lightning talk in 5 to 7 minutes. Usually the ones I've done are about 10 to 15, so we'll see how this goes, and please give me as much feedback as you can. So my name's Jamie Coleman. I'm a developer advocate for IBM. I've been doing talks for about a year and a half now. And today I'm going to be talking about the Earth's coolest data centers. So why this talk? First of all, I kind of want you to learn some cool stuff about data centers, to think about some of the environmental impacts of data centers, what some of the major cloud providers are doing to kind of reduce their carbon footprint, and how developers, what they can do to kind of aid in reducing energy consumption. So why this is a topic I'm talking about, I am a Java developer. I work on a Java application server, so this is completely unrelated to what I normally do. But essentially behind my desk, there is quite a big data center. And I love going in there, I love the noise, I love the sound. But every time I go in there, I kind of look at it and think, how much energy is this actually using? Bear in mind, this is a very small development data center. So then I started doing some research on it, and then hence I created this talk. So I'm going to start off with some random facts about data centers. So there's 7,500 major data centers in the world. London has the biggest concentration with just over 300. And currently the Natural Resource Defense Council predicts about 3% of the global energy supply is being used by data centers. So let's think about data for a second. Every hour the internet produces enough traffic to fill 7 million DVDs, and that can scale Mount Everest 95 times per hour. So that's a lot of data. If we include all the smaller data centers, like the ones I have in the office, there's 500,000 of those worldwide, so quite a lot. So some of the environmental impacts of this. Bear in mind, all these data centers, we can't see them. We don't know how much energy they're using. They're generally in remote locations. But by 2021, they predict about 1/3 of all data will pass through the cloud. And in the next few years, data centers will start consuming 1/5 of the world's energy supply. Now, if you look at cities like New York, Beijing, Vegas, Hong Kong, which are lit up, air conditioning everywhere, lights everywhere, but yet data centers, things we can't see, but we're using, are going to consume 1/5 of all the energy on our planet. So let's have a look. It's not all doom and gloom. What are some of the cloud providers doing? AWS was quite good at starting off the revolution with cloud. Essentially, they had a lot of spare capacity in their data centers, and they kind of thought, why don't we rent this out? So this sharing of hardware basically will help us reduce our energy costs. If we have our own private data centers, moving stuff to the cloud, the clouds will always be more energy efficient. Their job is to reduce the cost of energy and how much it costs to run all your equations, etc. So moving stuff to the cloud will reduce energy. And AWS has a very good sustainability pledge. They're building wind farms and solar farms all over the world to try and basically become carbon neutral. IBM is also the same. We have a sustainability pledge, so we're trying to use as much renewable resources as possible. We also have portable data centers, which are quite good for disaster recovery and stuff like that. So say if a disaster happens and it wipes out a load of data centers which are required for emergency services or something like that, we can rock up and use one of these data centers to essentially get these services back online. And we can also move data centers to parts of the globe where renewable energy is more abundant. So like Iceland or Greenland or places like that where they do have a lot of renewable energy, we can just set up data centers there quite quickly. One other little thing, so this is actually 2 pictures at the top and the bottom are basically pictures of the data center behind me. And they like to play a game, basically moving the racks around, moving the vents to try and reduce the amount of cooling they require. And one thing they notice is they put doors and a roof on the racks and pump the air into the middle, they reduce their energy bill in regards to cooling by about 30%. So directing things, playing feng shui with your data centers definitely helps. Google are definitely the pioneers here. They have reached 100% renewable energy in their data center and their offices, and they, in my opinion, they definitely have the best looking data centers. Microsoft, they have actually made a statement that they want to remove all the carbon they have put into the atmosphere since their company began. Brilliant statement. I really hope they manage to achieve it. They're also playing with stuff like putting data centers in the ocean. Now, it's good, and they'll probably get a load of ideas and great innovation from it, but I'm not sure putting all our data centers in the ocean is probably a good idea. That might end up increasing the ocean temperature. Who knows? But still, lots cool that they're innovating and playing around with this tech. And Apple, again, they're also a brilliant company in regards to renewable energy. They have loads of solar farms, and their headquarters is basically just one big solar array. So I'm saying all of this, but what can developers do? Serverless technology can help us. Being able to scale stuff very quickly will help reduce the amount of energy we use. Microservices, they do have overhead, but generally because of the scalability and how much we can micromanage them, essentially we can save energy. So this is your local data center. Obviously the red is wasted hardware. In the cloud, we move our monolith to the cloud. We've now got a bit more resources we can share out between people and save ourselves a bit of energy, but still not as granular as we wanted. And then if we go down to microservices, obviously we have more granularity, and the resources we're not using, we're not paying for, and we're sharing with other people. Crew is also an interesting technology. It basically now enables you to hibernate your application servers. We've played around with it at OpenLiberty, and we've managed to get our startup time from above 1 second down to like 0.2, 0.3. It's very early on in the stages of this technology, but it definitely looks like it's going to be promising. So what I want people to think about is people generally don't care so much about how much, developers don't care about how much they spend on the cloud. But if you then turn that into energy, which a lot of the time it will equal energy because that's the main cost that developed data centers have once they've been constructed, then it's a bit more relatable to us in society. So this is kind of what we don't want. We don't want lag when we bring up a service. We want it to come up instantly. And again, this is what saves energy on the cloud. So just to quickly finish off, just some record-holding data centers. The biggest one in the world is in Mongolia. It costs $3 billion to build, and it's the size of 140 football pitches. One of the most green data centers is in Green Mountain. This is where NATO stores all its servers, and it requires pretty much zero cooling because it's stored inside the mountain, and the rock from the mountain actually cools down the data center, which is pretty cool. And lastly, Facebook built a data center in the Arctic Circle where they take Arctic water from one of the rivers. And inside the data center, they've actually made all the lights blue just to kind of coincide with the fact they're in the Arctic, which is quite cool. So the main thing about this talk is I just wanted you all to think about these things. There's loads and loads of things you can do to kind of help reduce our carbon footprint. Obviously, this is a lightning talk, so I can't talk about too many of them. But yeah, just have a quick think. See if there's anything you can do regarding programming or architecture just to save a bit of energy. So thank you for listening to my talk, and I'm 30 seconds over, so I hope that's not too bad.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. That was really interesting.
No worries.
Yeah, some fascinating stats in there. 1/5 of the world's energy.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I have a talk that's 45 minutes long for this one. The original one's 15 minutes. So for this, I tried to get as much interesting stuff in there as I could in the 7 minutes. So
I think the point is, Jamie, if you do your talk in 5 minutes, you're saving energy.
Yeah, I like that, Steve. That's a good shout.
Does anyone have any questions on that for Jamie before we move on to the next section?
I got one. If I recall correctly, you said at the beginning that currently the data centers use 3% of the energy, and then you said it's going to be 1/5. So that means you're expecting that to go up, to 6x or 7x in the next years?
Yeah, massively, 100%. So people are all on a migration journey, where a lot of people are with their companies and stuff. So everyone is moving to the cloud. And then you've got stuff like 5G. This is going to increase the amount of data we produce dramatically, if not by 6 times. And that's just That's just 5G. So there is a lot of things going on in the world. And even COVID, for example, we're all working from home. We're producing so much more data, which we just didn't produce before by being at home, using all these online services. So yeah, it will do that. On the plus side, the companies are offsetting it by actually creating renewable resources like solar farms and wind farms. So they're not actually going to be consuming more carbon, more energy that's produced by carbon, but the amount of energy they use compared to the global comparison will go up dramatically in the next few years.
I didn't quite follow that. Why is people moving to the cloud increasing? I would say it's probably less because you're using...
It's not just moving to the cloud, it's the fact people are taking advantage of the cloud, and we're utilizing data more and more, and our data is now going through the cloud, whereas before it'd be stuck in a private data center, probably get deleted after a year or so, especially data we're not using, whereas that doesn't seem to happen to data nowadays. People want more data and they're storing more data, which is having basically the impacts that we're using more energy.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Carsten, for the questions there.
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously, again, another thank you to all the speakers and everybody that's given feedback. My inbox is alive with it. So yeah, really, really appreciate that. Okay. So I don't know, Dom, is this what, our 13th, 14th of these or something like that?
It's our 11th.
11th. Okay. And each time we've sort of done the lightning talks, and we're like, it's cool, this is great, but we want to do something at the end. So we were lucky enough to hook Trish in last time, and Trish said, well, why don't we finish it with having a bit more of an open discussion about lightning talks. So that's what we're going to do. It seemed like a great attempt to do so. So any questions at all, put them on the chat that you've got there. If you've got any questions on how to get into speaking, why speak, or anything like that, and we can throw them at Trish and Steve, who have done this for years now, and obviously had a lot of success out of it. I would like to start with a question though. There's obviously a lot of people on this this call. We've got 24 participants, and I just can see a number of names that haven't yet spoken and that are in our aspiring speakers group. Would you have any advice to them on why they should get involved? Any way it can benefit them, and any way to deal with the nerves that literally everybody experiences and goes through when they first start speaking? Anything at all either of you would
Dude,
take
that's
that?
like 4 different questions.
Yeah, sorry about that. Any advice for people that are listening that haven't spoken yet?
I would like to address the thing about nerves, because it is one of the most asked questions. I do want to say that actually I was very nervous about this presentation. And I've been giving presentations for like 10 years now. The nerves don't go away, you just get better at dealing with it, that's all. So the thing is, the first time you give a presentation, accept the fact you're going to be really nervous, and then the more you do it, the more you get used to being nervous. It's as simple as that. The nerves do go away a little bit, but they don't go away.
Yeah, I agree. Like I've been doing it for just a year and a half now, and every time I go to another presentation, I think, oh, I'm not going to be nervous this time. I'm always nervous every time. It's just like you said, just channel the nerves, use them, put them into energy in your presentation, because they won't go away.
I had the best advice from a speaking coach, actually. He said, nervousness feels a little bit like excitement. So just think of it as excitement. Instead, you've got the butterflies in your tummy, and just think, oh, I'm excited about this. This is an opportunity for me.
What do I do, Steve? I dance around on stage, don't I, when I get nervous?
Yes. Jamie's first go, we took Jamie to, I don't know, somewhere, Croatia or somewhere. and Jamie's excitement came out by him not using his hands.
It was Romania, yeah, that was it. I was pointing to stuff on the projector with my feet. It worked all right, though. I asked people's opinions, and they told me to leave it, so I was like, okay, I won't try and stop dancing.
Okay, right. I need a bit more explanation on this. You were pointing to things with your feet.
Okay, yeah. So bear in mind, it wasn't just a projector. It was one of those humongous screens that you have behind you. Yeah, and I was talking, and there was stuff on the bottom of the screen, and rather than point to it, I just moved my leg that in direction. I don't know. It was the first time I'd done a live talk on stage. I still do dance around. That's how I channel my nervousness, but I don't point to stuff on the screen anymore.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. So basically, don't try and deal with nerves, just accept them.
Yeah, basically.
And get used
they
to
won't go away. They won't go away.
The way through this is, it's that Tricia said about being yourself. If you can, the talk has to be from you. And if you, as I say, if you own the talk and you've done a little bit of practice and you've got it down to the right length for the time, then it'll be so much easier. And I always say that the most important thing in these talks is the starting, how you get going. I don't know. I mean, I've been recording talks now, which is just painful. But the advantage is that I get to try out. I start my introduction, and then it goes, "Oh, it didn't work. All right, I'm going to do that again." Because if you get that first minute, if it goes well, you're calm, you can carry on. If it goes poorly, you're sitting there trying to figure out how to catch up and say what you want to say, and it's just horrible. So practice the beginning and just get the talk to fit the time. And I think it's a lot better to do that than it is to just dive straight in.
Perfect. Okay, starting to get a few questions coming through. Firstly, Christian, you have a question?
Yeah, so if you don't mind me. So this one is actually aimed at Trish. So I myself come from a background in psychology. I'm relatively new to coding. I'm trying to get into it. That's why I'm here, trying to also improve my speaking. I would say I'm quite good with it. But yeah, coming from a background in psychology, I know quite a few techniques. You mentioned, obviously, all the physiological responses whenever you're nervous, they're exactly the same when you're really excited. So as Trish pointed out, they're definitely very good ones. What I'm wondering is, what other techniques do you know of? Because another one that I know of is whenever you approach a talk or anything else that you're really nervous about, what really helps is if you sort of tell yourself in your mind, it's the mind state. If you see it as an opportunity, you'll be much better at it. If you see it as a problem, as this huge challenge, you're going to be much worse at it. So what other techniques do you have for us? Because I know a few. I'm wondering what you have on your side.
I think this circles around a little bit to what one of the questions Barry asked when he flung like 4 questions at us, like, why do you do the presenting? What's the point? Because you need a why to get over that big barrier of it's scary and you're nervous and you're not good at it because you haven't done it before. So you do need the why. And so I've already lost my train of thought, honestly. Like, I just went off into 16 different directions. It's not, yes, it has to not be a problem. You can't be thinking of it as this is a huge audience or this is a talk I don't know very well or anything like that. So there's a number of different things that I do to get around that. One is just things like simple deep breathing and things like I practice a lot. I do a lot of preparation because that's part of my I know me. I feel more comfortable if I've done a lot of preparation. But ultimately, for those first few things, you have to get excited about the why. Why am I doing this? Why am I standing up on stage in front of like 100 people? What is the purpose of this? And of course, this is going to be totally down to you. For some people, it's quite exhilarating to be on stage, talk to a bunch of people, and if one person comes up to you afterwards and says, "I really learned something from that," for me, that's enough. Like one person saying, "I learned one thing," it's worth giving that talk to like 100 people, 99 of whom were on their laptops not paying attention. But I get a lot of buzz out of someone learning something. That's probably because my parents are teachers and ultimately I want to be a very highly paid teacher. And so that's kind of why I do this for a living. So I do the presenting and the stuff as a developer advocate because I really enjoy it. But that's not for everybody. Not everyone wants to be a professional technical presenter. So for those people, why do they want to do lightning talks? Why do they want to get better at public speaking? And a lot of it is really just about profile raising. So profile outside of your own company in terms of like making yourself look better, in terms of getting a new job if you've got a sucky job, but also profile inside your own company. You will not progress to even much beyond, or even in some places to senior developer, if you can't present your ideas adequately to someone to say, look, I think your architecture is wrong because of X, Y, and Z. And getting better at public speaking can help you in your day-to-day jobs with some of those things. So if you can find that why, that will help you overcome your nerves. It will help you do that first presentation, and it will help carry you through like every time you run into these stumbling blocks.
Yeah, I second that completely.
James, did you have anything you'd add on the question of why? James Carman out there?
Yeah, I was trying to jump in there earlier, but we went on, but then Tricia brought it back, so that's good. Trisha is such a nice person. She does this so that other people learn and stuff like that. I have a little more selfish motivation, but my why typically is I want to learn something. Like I will sign up for something I know nothing about. Spoiler alert, I never used ArchUnit before I was preparing for this talk. I used it as an opportunity. I used that, like Christian was saying, this is now an opportunity for me to learn something new. And I had to do so in order to, like I think Trisha was saying, you got to know it well enough that you don't look like an idiot in front of a bunch of these smart people. So that's one of my motivations I use is that I want to learn something new.
Great, thanks, James. I actually wrote a post a couple of months ago on the 10 things I've learned from speaking to the experts and why you should consider speaking at events. And it all came from speaking to people like Trish and a number of people out there that have achieved a lot of success as speakers and have seen their careers impacted as a result. And in fact, James, learning was one of the ones that came up on there. I think a number of high-profile speakers do exactly that. Jim Goff had one of the best talks at one of the conferences he spoke at, and he knew nothing about the subject before he started. So it certainly seems to be a common thread, I think, as learning. But there's so many reasons. So yeah, good technique. Okay, Alex had a question on there. How much do you practice and how much do you learn a lightning talk? Any advice on that from anyone?
You know that if no one else jumps in, I will say something. So
that's true.
Okay, so I'm going to say for lightning talks, I work harder because you don't have time to repace. With a lightning talk, you've got 5 minutes. If you wing it too much, it can go completely wrong. So for a lightning talk, I'll put a lot more effort to try and make sure the pace works for me.
Yeah, so when I do a full length talk, I don't have to worry too much because if I forget stuff or I add extra stuff in, you've got plenty of room either side generally to do that. Whereas a lightning talk, you really have to stick to your points and get your point across quick as possible. And that is, yeah, difficult to say the least.
So
I agree with both of those, but I actually have a counterpoint. For this lightning talk specifically, because I tend to over prepare stuff, and one of the points I wanted to make in this session was that the amount of time it takes you to prepare for the talk is the amount of time you've set aside to prepare for the talk. So if I started prepping this talk when I first volunteered for it like 3 weeks ago, I would have taken 3 weeks to prepare this talk. But I purposefully for this one, I said, I will not even open PowerPoint until Friday morning. I will not do anything on the slides. I will not practice it until Friday morning, because otherwise I will spend hours and hours and hours. And it's a topic I know very well. I already had in my head what the 3 points were. So I'm not going to go round and round in circles polishing this thing, because I should be able to put the 3 points on a set of slides and talk around those 3 points, keeping an eye on the time. So it depends a lot on the topic. If they're technical talks like live coding, you have to spend a lot of time coming up with the original demo. You have to spend a lot of time reshaping the demo into a series of steps that make sense to the audience. And then you have to practice that again and again and again. And yeah, that just takes a long, long, long time.
And for someone getting started, Trish, like someone giving their first or second lightning talk, how much time would you say they should spend learning, preparing and practicing and that kind of thing?
I want to say 4 to 8 hours. Okay. I don't know if I've just kind of, I think
the 4 hours maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it
depends on the content though, right? I mean, if you know the content, like you were saying, if you know the content very well, you probably spend a lot less time on something you knew a lot about, you didn't know much about. So
if it needs code, it's going to take a lot longer. If it's demos and code, it's just going to take a lot longer. But if it's a case of, I need to come up with a scenario, I need to come up with a story, and then I need to put stuff down on slides, and then I need to run through it 2 to 3 times, then I think half a day to a day. My first couple of lightning talks, I think I would have put together in the evenings over the course of a week, something like that. Because any more than that, and you're going to end up, and well, this is me again, so it depends on who you are and what your style is. But if you decide to spend any more time on it than that, you will end up spending a lot of time messing around with stupid transitions and trying to create the right things on the slides. And that's not important. The slides are not your presentation. The slides are just not that important. What is important is the message that you're getting across. And no one really cares whether your transition is 0.2 seconds or 0.5 seconds. Like, no one cares.
I think it's important to spend time from what I've taken. I think well, rather than time, I think it's important to get to a point, to put enough time into it till you've got to a point where you're happy with it, before you give it. That's I think what I would say, and that might be an hour for somebody that is either very confident or just carefree and doesn't really care and is just like, oh, I'll wing it when I get there. We've definitely had those kind of lightning talks, but then I know other people that have spent 10, 20 hours putting together a lightning talk because they are so particular about getting things a specific way.
My recommendation for people like that, especially if it's your first couple of lightning talks, is that's not the right topic to do for your first lightning talk, because you're going to be put off by the amount of effort you need to do. So I'm the sort of person, I do like to over prepare for stuff. When I gave my first Java 8 talk, I literally read every single book that was out for Java 8. I read every book cover to cover. This is when I was first a full-time developer advocate. So I had 3 to 6 weeks to prep for the talk. And I mean 3 to 6 weeks of 40-hour weeks, not 3 to 6 weeks of evenings and weekends. So I don't recommend that for your first lightning talk, you spend that much time prepping it, because it'll just put you off from doing any more talks. It just takes too long. You want to set aside, especially because you're doing it on your free time, you want to set aside a few evenings, maybe a Sunday, and then put together something which you can confidently deliver that you feel good about. And if it requires more than 3-4 days solid work to put together the lightning talk, that's not a topic that you're confident on, that you can confidently deliver.
Fair enough. Okay, I like that. Well, at least we've got some, so 4 to 8 hours from what you're saying is a safe amount of time.
And I think nowadays, since you record everything, at least one go at trying to do it end to end and record yourself, and then just watch, because there's no reason not to do that nowadays. You'll get to see. As some of us have found, you go to 5-minute talk and then you start talking, and then after 5 minutes you realise you're still in the intro. So yeah.
So many times I've been there. Okay, cool. So we had a question come in from Helen, and then we've got another one from Carsten. So Helen said, how many lightning talk is the right ballpark number before you progress onto longer talks? So 20, 25 minutes-ish, in your opinions. Is there a number?
I was going to say 0. You don't have to go to a lightning talk.
You've been told, Helen. Just let us know when you want us to book you in.
That was quite harsh, wasn't it, Barry? That was quite harsh.
I'm so sorry, Helen. The reason I say 1 is because that's what happened to me. When I was part of the London Java community, I said to Martijn and Barry and all the rest of them, I was like, look, let me have a year of doing lightning talks and like getting used to the idea, and then I will progress to a bigger talk. And then an opportunity came up to co-present with Martin Thompson at Java 1, like soon after my lightning talk. And Martin was like, you are going to co-present with me. And I'm like, but I've only done 1 lightning talk. And it was fine. It went fine. So you could just spend, again, it depends a bit on the person, but the type of person that I am, I would have spent a lot of time waiting until I was ready, over preparing, over worrying about stuff. And it's just do it. Just go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Do you know what I love about having Trish in anything like this related to getting into talking? Is Trish reminds me of like myself, I was bullied into opening my first LJC presentation. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to do it. I'm a recruiter. No one wants to hear from a recruiter. I'm not going to open this. Like, I was so nervous about it. And again, I just spent the whole time with my hands on my hips, like had no idea, so uncomfortable. But I was pushed into and really strongly encouraged that was what was going to happen by somebody that became a mentor. And Trish, I know you've spoken a couple of times about similar things for yourself. You were told, sponsored or coerced or whatever you want to say into, come on, you can do this, you can do this. And so many speakers that are now brilliant speakers had to go through that same level of having a big push to get involved. I think it's such an important part of the story of doing it. So there you go, Helen. We'll work out dates afterwards.
Trisha said there about sharing. That is another good way. If you can find somebody you can do a joint session with, that's really good, because that will remove so much of the nerves, because you've got training wheels with you, which makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I started. So started help doing the small presentations at the start of workshops. Then I did a co-presentation with Graham when we went to San Francisco. I basically really wanted to go to San Francisco, and as a result of that, I had to do co-present with Graham. And then, and since then I've just been doing my own talks. And like, this is the first lightning talk in 5 to 7 minutes I've ever done. So it doesn't have to be a specific way around.
Yeah, nice.
So,
We've had, again, a number of people that have said similar on the Q&As that we've run, that have started doing things as to Daniel Bryant started with Manny, I believe. Richard Warburton started with Jim Goff, and all have gone on to huge things individually. So that's a really great point. Okay, Carsten, did you have a point you wanted to make, or a question?
Yeah, actually, it's a question. So I've given some talks as well, and one of the kind of feedback I got is that in your talk you want to have a story, right? So the person told me that, you know, you want to get somebody out of a tree, then throw a couple of rocks at them, and then get them safely down. Now, in my presentations, I usually follow something else. I try to kind of come at it more like a sales presentation. So here's the kind of problem you have, you know, here's why you should care, and here's the kind of solution to it. So the reason why I don't like these stories too much is that usually they are made up, and they can be, you know, anything you want to. So as an audience, you know, I'm not convinced by a story that's made up, and it can be anything the presenter wants me to, and I'm not sure how I relate to that. But so please tell me why I should use stories, or more stories, or how to use a story in a presentation so that it doesn't you know, feel made up.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. When I talk about stories, I don't mean fiction. I mean books. Books have beginning, middle, and end, and there is a plot, and there is you know, key points at the end or whatever. So it's I talk about stories in the terms of having a well-structured presentation, not one where you wander around the place, where you're very clear from the beginning what you want to communicate, and you tell people that at the beginning, and you go through it in sequence, and then you recap, or something like that. But a strong narrative arc where you can take somebody on a journey from I've never used this tech before to here's what I did, here's how you follow along to an end. If you just put up a list and talk through the list of, I've got 10 things to tell you and they're all unrelated, that's very confusing. So generally, I'm saying, from my point of view, when I talk about story, I talk about an arc, of a narrative arc, and a structure.
I think journey is a good word there, because it works for, I do a lot of live demos, and when I put together the code that will ultimately be demoed, I approach it in a particular way, but when I'm demoing it, it will be in a different order, because it's all about the journey. Like you start with, like you say, you start with nothing. Let's add one of these. Let's create a test. Let's see what happens what happens when we come from this angle, and then I want to. So that's a presentation needs to have a set of logical steps that the viewer can follow. But there's another side to the story thing as well. I did a co-presentation, talking about co-presenting, I did a co-presentation with Dan North, which was the most underprepared presentation I've ever done in my life. It was absolutely terrifying, because Dan's like, let's co-present at QCon London. And I'm like, okay, let's prep this. And he says, yes, we'll prep it on the morning before we give the talk. I'm like, oh my God, this is like a major international conference. But what it was a presentation about interviewing, about being interviewed, and about interviewing people for jobs. And so what we did is we just we spun together a bunch of real stories that we actually had, real experiences we'd had either interviewing people or being interviewed or seeing it from somewhere else. And that's like, it's a series of interconnected stories. The reason why that's useful is because humans understand stories. We learn through stories. We learn through tales, through other people's experiences. And that way people can go, oh yeah, I see, like I could imagine myself in that situation, or I will be able to recognize that situation in the future. So those kinds of stories are really helpful for people to learn.
Yeah. I would say though, also having human analogies in your talk can help as well. So if you're trying to get something complicated across, and you can come up with some equivalent analogy in real life, then that works, because that helps people short circuit the learning process behind your difficult concept. So if you can find the right human analogy, then that works as well.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting. And I love the use of analogies. I think it's a really great point, Steve. I've listened to a hardcore history, or a podcast called Hardcore History. If anyone's interested in history and hasn't heard it, check it out. It's incredible. And they managed to make all these very complicated stories of history really accessible. And this guy, Dan Carlin, does it by using these analogies constantly. And I've seen them again used in a few lightning talks, and it is just such a good way of getting those complex things across shortly. But that answers your question, Carson, on using stories and how you could do it. Okay, fantastic. Well, I think that is it from me. Do we have anyone here listening that hasn't spoken yet that would be potentially interested in speaking in the future?
I would.
Yes, we got one. We got one. Brilliant, Kabir. Okay, well, we'll follow up with you afterwards. Anyone else that would be potentially open to it, or maybe hasn't spoken for a while, or have we just got the one?
I think Helen might want a longer talk from that earlier conversation.
That way, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah,
I'll have a chat with Trish and get back to you on that. But yeah, I would like one. It's true.
Nice. Good. Oh, well, thank you very much to the panel there then. James Carman has also said if anybody would like to speak to his Java user group, where are you, James? I know you're US based, but whereabouts in the US?
The one I'm involved with is the Cincinnati, Ohio Java user group. So like I was saying that, if anybody wants to practice their talk, you can give a talk to a bunch of people you're probably never going to see. If that helps with nerves, that you don't have to worry about, if you feel like you might embarrass yourself in front of your peers, we're here, we're a pretty cool crowd. You all are more than welcome to come give a talk to us. We do it once a month. Our time, it's 11:30, so there'd be 4:30 in the afternoon for you all. So.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
I think I've got a few people actually, so I'll send you an email. Got some people who'd like to practice, so I'll do that today.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Our next event is going to be in 2 weeks. So Dom, is it live already, or is it going to be live soon?
It's going to be live soon. Next week, okay. Early next week.
Okay, perfect. We'll just study or just wait for the LJC updates on that. Again, thanks to everyone for getting involved, and we'll be in touch with everyone that said they'll talk, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much.
Thanks.